when I'm actually at the meet, I'm not even really thinking about the lift. I'm just trying to max out my arousal so that I can generate as much neuromuscular force. And then when we start to go out for attempts, I'm pulling up pictures of my kids. I'm pulling up motivational quotes. After they yell, bar is loaded, you have 1 minute. And I always think of it as like, this is like a sprinter at the starting line. As soon as they say that, I'm getting shot out of here like a cannon. They're having to hold me back right now. And as soon as that hits, I am gone.
My name is Derek Wolfe. I'm a Super Bowl champion and a 10-year NFL vet. Now, after a decade of professional football, I'm focusing on my other passions. What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Wolfe Untamed podcast. Today's guest is Layne Norton. He's got a PhD in Nutritional Sciences, and he's known for debunking people on social media for their false statements on food and nutrition and strength training and powerlifting and bodybuilding. He's written books. Really special guest. Really excited to have him. My question is, like, what is the best breakfast? Like, if I was going to say, okay, does it depend on what you're going to be doing, like right after you eat, or does it depend on because sometimes people don't work out like right as soon as they get up, and I've had people tell me that, hey, it's better if you don't eat before you work out, but I've never felt like that. I always felt like I had to eat something before I trained or else I just was like low energy.
Yeah. So I think it's like, we have to get specific about what the goal is. If we're talking about building muscle, losing fat, we're talking about performance, like those sorts of things. When it comes to building muscle, I mean, it's really, it's an aggregate process. It's kind of like, if I went to you as a D lineman and was like, well, what drill is the best for becoming the best D lineman, right? And it's like, well, There's really no one drill, right? It's like an aggregate of work, right? Like you just got to do a lot of repeated stuff over a long period of time. And think about muscle building the same way, right? So you need to get enough protein in and ideally enough calories in as well. And, so when it comes to breakfast, I mean, that's your first meal breaking a fast, right? And we do see like your rates of muscle protein synthesis will be depressed after a night-long fast. And so coming out of that, you do want to hit it with some high quality protein. Usually what it takes to kind of maximize muscle protein synthesis just depends on, one, obviously like the mass of the person, two, the quality of the protein. But I tell people in general, if you're getting 30 to 50 grams of protein at a meal, you're gonna max that response. We're talking about somebody who's a little bit on the lighter side, lean mass wise, and they're consuming like a high quality protein source, like whey protein or something like that, then 20, 30 grams is going to do it, right? But if we're talking about somebody who's, plant-based or something like that, they're getting a plant protein source higher on the end of lean mass, might be 50, 55 grams, something like that. So it really kind of depends. But as for me, let's take kind of plant-based out of it and assume that we're talking to omnivores here. I would say, most animal-based sources of protein are going to be pretty high quality in terms of digestibility, bioavailability, and the PDCAAS, the amino acid score, and then like the branched chain amino acid content. So if you're getting, 30 to 50 grams of protein from things like, eggs, whey protein, name your kind of animal-based source of protein, fish, meat, whatever, all those are fine. So I kind of tell people like, hey, it just depends on like when you wake up, what you feel like, right? Like some people, for me, a lot of times I just down a shake because I'm like getting up and I'm ready to get to work. You know what I mean? I usually train in the afternoons. So if I was going to train in the morning though, I would definitely pair that with some source of carbohydrate, whether it's, usually I'm going to do a combination of kind of like slower-ish digesting carbohydrate as well as some fast digesting carbohydrate. Obviously, fast digesting carbohydrate gives you glucose in your bloodstream pretty quickly. So you have that available for your hard workouts. And then a little bit of a slower carbohydrate, that kind of provides a little bit longer lasting fuel, depending on how long your training session is, right? Like some people, you and I will always think in terms of athlete, right? So we're thinking 2-3 hour, really hard training session. I mean, there is the possibility of being glycogen depleted, and sometimes you even got to think about, intra workout nutrition. If you're training as hard as, somebody like you and me, I mean, obviously my training is quite different for powerlifting, but I'll still be in the gym for, 2.5, 3 hours doing a lot of compound movements. And that is pretty energetically taxing. So I will take like a Gatorade with me or something like that, just in case I need something quick, that's easy on the stomach. Or I'll take like an electrolyte carbohydrate combination. If I feel like I need it, I'll drink it. If I don't feel like I need it, I won't drink it. But some people, they go for 45 minutes and it's really not that intense. And, they're worried about like, do I need intra workout nutrition? Do I need a bunch of, you're going to be just fine. Like if you eat enough carbohydrates over the course of the day, you're going to be fine. Right. So it's not just what we eat beforehand, right? If we have been consuming enough carbohydrates, enough total calories, enough protein over a 24-hour period, that is going to set us up even better to be fueled. And then I do know in the morning specifically, some people will say, well, I don't feel great when I have something on my stomach. I don't like to work out with food on my stomach. What I'll tell those people is, okay, if you absolutely feel like that, if you can tolerate like a smoothie or a whey shake with some like banana or some source of carbohydrate mixed in, or even like dextrose, cool. If not, if you could at minimum do like an essential amino acid solution just to get you out of that catabolic state, get your protein synthesis going again, great. But if some people have said, I don't know if I believe them or not, but some people say, oh, if I have anything other than water, it just, tears me up or whatever. Okay, well, if we look at the research literature, I'm not saying there's not people out there who don't perform better fasted. Some people just individually, whether it's psychosomatic or whatever, they do feel better fasted. Okay. But I would really make sure that the meal you're eating before bed then is, pretty good in terms of making sure you're topped off glycogen wise before you go to sleep. Muscle glycogen doesn't really get depleted by sleep, liver glycogen a little bit, but, making sure that you're going to be fueled up over a 24-hour period is the biggest thing. And as far as like best breakfast, it's hard to put a metric on that, but, kind of protein to meet your needs to, maximize muscle protein synthesis, wherever you get that from. And, whether it's eggs or, a whey protein and an oatmeal or something like that, whatever you want. Then fueling carbohydrate based on your workouts and also your overall calorie kind of intake, because obviously, like if you're, for example, dieting for bikini show, like your wife was, it'd be great to be fueled up for a workout, but guess what? You're limited to 100 grams of carbohydrate a day or whatever it is, based on your lean mass and how much you burn per day. And so, you've got to put it in the context of the overall diet, right? But yeah, like in general, I tell people calories, depending on your goal, whether it's fat loss, building muscle, maintenance, calories are going to dictate like how much carbohydrate you can get in. Then protein is what you set first, right? Because that's your building block. So 30 to 50 grams at a meal. Then fill in energy wise with carbohydrate and fat, kind of based on your preference, because both are fuels. Now, I would say you probably don't want a ton of fat before a workout just because it can delay gastric emptying. And so, you probably don't want that, but I tell people it's not a huge deal,
Yeah, I think it depends on what fats you're putting in too, right? I mean, like,
sure.
Are you doing avocado, or you like what are you actually putting in your body? That's the thing is, as an athlete, food isn't looked at as the same way as everybody else. It's looked at as fuel. You know what I mean? So, my wife gets on me sometimes when we sit down for dinner and I just wolf it down real quick. And I'm like, it's just like I'm filling my car up, because I'm so conditioned to look at food as fuel.
When you're probably also conditioned to eat quickly because you were so busy when you were playing.
Well, yeah, it's like we got to get to the next meeting. Like I have a meeting, I got to like get this down so I can get some water in me, then get to the next meeting, because we weren't allowed to eat in our meeting rooms. So we had to like hurry up and eat and then, get to the next thing.
Exactly.
And it was also like, you're getting fined for pounds over and under. If you're underweight, you're getting fined.
Wow.
If you're overweight, $1,000 a pound, so it was, yeah. So like, we had a teammate one time, his report weight was like 350 and he showed up at like 420 pounds.
Good Lord.
And he just couldn't get it off. And throughout the season, it ended up being like almost $400,000 in fines just in weight.
Wow.
Fines, which that's pre-tax. So really that's like 800 grand, so almost $1 million just because, he couldn't control his eating. And it was, and you know, I never saw him eat, you know, he was like one of those closet eaters,
Yeah.
but let's talk about like, so, cause this can be really confusing for people, you know, when it comes to the eating and like, what's your goal and this and that. Like, I think it gets really overwhelming for people and they end up just kind of, yeah, they do these crazy, they go to Orange Theory and do like some crazy HIIT workout, but they haven't put the right kind of fuel in their body. And then after they've put their body into like that stress mode. So they're just storing fat and they're like, I don't understand why I'm just skinny fat now. Like, I don't have any muscle mass. I just kind of have this like loose skin hanging off of me. Do you have like a system set up through one of your, cause you have this, the physique coaching academy. Is that kind of what that does? Is that gives you like, makes it simple for people? I don't know. I just want to know.
So Physique Coaching Academy is more like me training other coaches to be able to coach better.
Okay.
Because I just, you know, I'm sure as your wife knows from competing in bodybuilding and whatnot, like it's the Wild West with coaches out there. Like there are some really unqualified people giving really dangerous advice. So that's why I created Physique Coaching Academy, was to hopefully like, you know, be able to coach coaches better so that they could be better coaches, get better results for their clients, and also like not screw people up, you know?
Yeah.
I think one of the things that people don't realize, and actually when I worked with bikini competitors in particular, was I'm like, they got so focused on body weight, right? And they got so focused on the scale. And listen, the scale is a great tool. Like it's one of the most objective tools we have, right? But I kind of told them, I'm like, hey, why don't we focus on getting you stronger? You know, why don't we focus on like some stuff that's not physique related and just get your mind off that, get you strong. And you know what was crazy is once I got them like, you know, kind of doing like a powerlifting program, because they're like, well, I don't want to get too big. And I'm like, listen, you're not eating enough to get too big. You don't have the hormonal makeup to get too big. And if you do start growing a body part too big, we'll just stop lifting it. No big deal, right? And what I found was when they put more emphasis on performance and really went hard with that and focused on, you know, beating their numbers week after week, when that, it just released some of that tension, some of that stress that they had. And I think one, it made them more adherent to the diet. Like a lot of times these folks were so fixated on the scale, if they didn't hit the numbers they'd want, they get despondent and end up binge eating is kind of like an emotional response, right? Mm-hmm. So when we stopped fixating on that, got them to focus on like actually hard training, they got more adherent to the diet. They trained harder because they were also getting more fuel, and they built more muscle, which then they had better total energy expenditure, right? And so they were able to like, it became not such a daunting task. But I think so many people, and I've had this too, it's funny, the keto sort of low carb people, I'll put up like, they'll say, your body can't lose fat if you're always eating carbohydrates because your insulin's high. And I'm like, then why am I leaner than you? Please explain this. Like based on like, I mean, and that's the problem with having such a rigid theory is if your theory is that rigid, then it's pretty easy to disprove, right? And I'm like, okay, well, here's me eating 350 to 400 grams of carbohydrates a day, leaner than you. So please explain, right? And they'll say, it's funny. They always come back to, they say, well, you can eat that many carbs because you train so hard. And I'm like, why do you think I can train so hard? You know, because I fuel my body, right? Yeah. Like I can, like, this is not existing in isolation. These two things are in crosstalk, right? But you get so many people who just focus on eating less, eating less, eating less. And while, I mean, you know, I tell people, if you want to lose fat, you need to eat less calories than you burn. That is true. But if you're just focusing on the eating less part, and you're not focusing on actually training hard to optimize your body composition, I mean, you're going to get what you said. Like you're going to get people just doing cardio on a wheel, right? Where they're just getting smaller, but they're not necessarily getting that much leaner and their bodies don't look that much better. I mean, I tell people all the time, like, listen, muscle looks good. Fat is what looks bulky. I mean, are there some people who can get quote unquote too muscular naturally? Yeah, I guess maybe. But as somebody who has spent their entire adult life trying to get too muscular, and I just look athletic in a shirt, I mean, I'm not real worried about it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And yeah, I think people like have this notion of, well, I'm going to pick up like women say, I'm going to pick up a heavy dumbbell and just, you know, turn into the Hulk. And it's like, that's like getting in your car worried you're going to turn into Jeff Gordon, you know, worried you're going to turn into a NASCAR driver, right? Like,
yeah.
there's a lot of points between A and Z. You know what I mean? And yeah, I think the biggest things I really try to get people to focus on are the basics. You know, like one of the, you kind of mentioned it in passing. One of the reasons I do so much debunking is because when people put out this information, this is toxic, that's toxic. Um, 5 things that are stopping your, whatever, all this BS information. I put up something yesterday where somebody said something to the effect of, well, even if it's not completely accurate, if the overall message is good, isn't that what matters? Like, say people, like you say a food's toxic, but you're just trying to get people to eat less processed foods.
Yeah.
Yeah, I get where you're coming from, but details matter, because what tends to happen is we forget that people aren't robots, right? Like our stupid monkey brains do all kinds of weird stuff that's not conducive to progress, right? So for example, if you tell somebody, oh, don't eat processed foods, they're toxic, and they try to completely avoid processed foods, and eventually they end up having some processed foods invariably, because it's poison, because it's toxic in someone's mind. They end up just a lot of times going crazy and overeating a bunch, because they go, well, I've already screwed up. I've already, put this toxin in my body. I might as well just eat however much I want. Right. Whereas if you told them, hey, like, listen, this stuff isn't magic. Like, it's just easy to overeat, and too many calories can make you obese. And that's where most of the risks we see from this stuff are. Like, if you can moderate your intake, it's okay to have some processed food. Like, you wouldn't believe the number of people I worked with, not everybody, but the number of people, when you kind of said that, they just like relaxed automatically. And when they realized like they could lose fat still having a small bowl of ice cream at night, or having, a dessert, or whatever it is, like, it just made it so much easier for them. Now, again, people will straw man what I say. I'm not saying you should be eating processed foods, right? I'm just saying we have to be careful with how we couch this stuff, because otherwise people will make weird associations in their minds. And a lot of times it can have the exact opposite. I'll give you one more example. I was going to debate a guy about 10 years ago on clean eating versus flexible dieting, which flexible dieting is just, I track my macros and I fit in kind of whatever I want. Like, I make sure I get enough protein, enough fiber, but whatever foods fill that out. If I got extra for fun stuff, I do that. And this guy was like going to debate me on it. And my opening argument, he ended up later withdrawing from the debate. My opening argument was I had followed him on Facebook and taken screenshots of his cheat day. So I'd have a cheat day, right? And I added up the calories from junk food that he was getting on his cheat day, compared it to what I was getting just having it in moderation throughout the week. And he was eating like several hundred calories more a week of junk food just on that one day. And I'm like, so explain this to me. So it's bad to do it in moderation if you fit it in as part of your energy intake and macros, but it's totally fine to binge eat on it once per week. Like, please explain to me how this math makes sense, And so, yeah, one of the things I really try to do is get people to focus on the basics, do that stuff, because so many people just end up focusing on dumb stuff. I'm sure you saw it, like, in football, people, I'm sure, are looking for a magic solution to make them a better player quicker. And what really makes the difference? I mean, I'm guessing, doing the basics over and over and over
Repetition,
and over again.
repetition, making everything muscle memory. I mean, Layne, I saw some wild shit when I played. Like, even like in college football, like, high school was wild, because it's like there was no rules when I was in high school playing football. Like, we would lift crazy heavy, and we would go out and practice, and then we would do like 2 a days, and dehydrate, and water made you weak, and don't be soft, you don't need water. That was, and then we're drinking water out of a copper pipe anyway. So it's like, maybe it is better I don't have this water in me, but then I get to college, and it was like everybody was trying to put on mass. So everybody's trying to get as big and strong as they possibly can. And I saw like offensive linemen, they were giving them cups of gravy post-workout, giving them a big cup of gravy and making them drink it down just to get the calories. And then we'd go out and run 110s. Like, we'd lift heavy. We'd do heavy squats, heavy. Everything we did, my last 2 years, my junior and senior year, everything we did was to failure. Everything.
Ooh.
It didn't matter how heavy it was. Like, the heaviest I ever squatted was, I did 675, and it was to failure. And I don't even know how many reps I did. I just kept going until I like basically fell over, you know?
Yeah.
It was like everything was to failure. So you had somebody catching you when you fell out. And guys were just like passing out, falling out. And then we'd get up. We'd do that for like 2 hours. You know, we'd do crazy heavy legs for 2 hours. Then we'd go out and run 110s. And I mean, just in the heat too, because this is in the summer. So, but to have a guy like, they would just be throwing this stuff up. You're giving them a cup of gravy. Then you expect them to go out there and make these times with a belly full. It just was disgusting. The stuff. And then those Gatorade protein shakes they have.
Sure.
They're in the can. Remember they used to be in a can? They were just like, here, drink 10 of these a day. And I'm like, dude, these have 100 grams of sugar each. Like you're getting, and you see guys just like get really fat. And it was just like, dude, you're not putting on any real good mass. And I made the mistake of doing that my freshman year. Coming into my sophomore year, I was like, I went from 280 to like 320. And I was like, man, I do not feel good. I don't like the way I feel. So I'd cut it back and like focused on like eating healthier, eating better, and just putting more good calories into me instead of just like any calorie is a good calorie. Good calories are good. So I saw some wild shit. And then in the NFL, you think it would be even better because we have nutritionists and stuff, but it's still like, you should see some of these places, Denver was great. They fed us great here. No oils in our food and stuff like that, to just, put good, clean fuel on us. Then I go to Baltimore and it was like, they just were dumping oil in their food. And I'd noticed a difference. So I had to like get a chef and, make my own meals. So it's just, every place is different, and I've heard people in San Diego, whenever the Chargers were in San Diego, they made those guys pay for their own food.
Oh, wow.
And they would just bring food trucks. And I was like, wow.
And getting McDonald's and stuff.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, I think, one of the things I said this about athletics, my impression of it, because I was at University of Illinois, not exactly known for our football team, but when I was in grad school and they were looking for a nutritionist for the football team. And I'm in grad school, I left, I'm like, I think I'd be really good for this. I never played football, but like I watched the sport, I understand it. So I went in and the head strength and conditioning coach, I met with him for like an hour and a half and I walked out going, these guys don't know what they're doing. Like, I mean, as bad as it sounds, I was really unimpressed. I'm like expecting like some really, cutting it. I knew more about resistance training than this guy did,
Yeah.
And I think it has gotten better. I'm glad to see that. Like I was actually out at TCU a couple of weeks ago because I know some of the strength and conditioning coaches there, and we've kind of been in correspondence. And they're like, you should come out and like hang out and check out the football team, all that kind of stuff. And I really liked what I saw. I'm like, okay, there's like, he was telling me like, we only like max out like once a year, just as a benchmark, just to get the guys excited. We very rarely train to failure. Most of it is, we're working in 60, 70, 80% of a 1 rep max, really trying to push speed. They were doing a lot of, multiple plane stuff. I really liked what I saw. And I think it's come a long way compared to what you were talking about, where it's like, yeah, train slow, be slow. Like you don't want to be grinding a lot of reps as an NFL athlete. Like, sure, you can build muscle that way, but you care about being explosive. You don't care about how much muscle you have. You care about applicable strength and power.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah. Functional training. And that screwed me up when I got to Baltimore because the strength coach there, I went from, who Lauren Landau is, don't you?
Sounds
Have you heard the names? Well, he's all about functionality and like he wants quality over quantity. Like that's how he is. We want to see how much power you're at. You actually use it on your lifts.
Bar velocity device.
We use that all the time because he's like, I don't care how heavy it is. I just want to see how fast you're moving it.
Yeah, they had those. They had those at TCU. Every rack had a Tendo unit.
Yeah. Hey guys, I want to talk to you about one of my favorite sponsors, Juniper Mountain Coffee. Coffee without compromise. You're getting high quality coffee without the high prices. This is an American company that stands behind their values. They stand behind their coffee. These guys make some of the best coffee I've ever had. It's a coffee I drink every morning. Juniper Mountain Coffee works directly with the farmers, paying fair wages, and that way you have no middleman. There's no BS, no garbage. You're getting high quality products. So go check them out at junipermountaincoffee.com. So going to Baltimore, it was all they cared about was like how big your quads and your ass got. And I was like, we were doing like single leg deficit squats, down on a 3 count, quarter rep, back down all the way up. And I'm like, dude, we got to practice still. You're just like, you're putting my muscles in like the worst pot. I ended up ripping both labrums off the hip bones.
Ooh.
So both of them ripped off because of these workouts. And then I like tried to get, when I was coming back, I was trying to do Lauren stuff and they didn't like that. So that's ultimately what led me to retire. Like these guys are actually really hurting people and putting people in bad positions. And then they're wondering why they can't like finish at the end of the season and why they're so injured. It usually starts in the weight room.
And I think that's one of the biggest things is like trying to balance. I mean, I've talked to a couple of, strength and conditioning coaches. And I said, really during season, just trying to maintain whatever you got. Like, this is not the time to be trying to, like if you want to go hard, that's the off season is the time to do that where, hey, if you get a little dinged up, whatever, you can have time to, recover from it. But really like the main thing should be your resistance training should be not adding to the overall burden, because when we look at risk of injury and whatnot, like this is something I've really gotten into because I've been through a lot of injuries in my training and whatnot. A lot of it just boils down to like how recovered is the athlete. Like the less recovered you are, the more likely you are to incur an acute injury, and the higher the stress level, all that stress matters, psychological stress matters, sleep matters. You have to balance that with, of course, you want your players to be tough, right? So you have to put them in some difficult positions so that they are tough. But when you're doing like what you said, where you're training hard in the weight room, and then you're going out and you're running sprints, and then you're going out and you're practicing. I mean, the human body can only recover from so much, right?
Yeah.
And so I think and again, like I was impressed when I went to TCU and saw some of the stuff they did, that they're thinking about all this. They're thinking about total load. They're thinking about, okay, we're going harder on sprints this week, so we're going to back off on some of the stuff in the weight room. Okay, we're going harder in the weight room this week. We're going to back off some of this other stuff, right? Like we don't need to be maxing out, right? And it's a kind of similar thing. They're focused on how fast can we move this given load rather than let's just pile on a bunch of weight. Like I was watching them do pause safety bar squats. I don't think anybody was doing more than like 275. They were just trying to move lighter weights really quickly through a range of motion. But yeah, I mean, I think it's, this is also the problem. I think when I've been in business, marketing always thinks marketing is the most important thing. Finance always thinks they're the most important thing. Research and development always thinks they're the most important thing, right? But a business is all these things together. Well, a player or a team, your strength and conditioning coach is going to think about how can I optimize strength and conditioning, right? Your football coach just cares about winning games, right? And then if you have a speed coach, they're caring about speed. Like everybody thinks that these things in their lane are the most important things, but it's like a symphony, right? And you got to get it to play together. And so I think that the next level of stuff is going to be, having better tools to objectively measure recovery, and then auto-regulating training, not just telling a player, because I come in some days for training and I look at my velocities. I'm like, yeah, I ain't got it today, when I'm warming up. And it's like, I could try to grind through that, but hey, my risk of injury is going to go way up. It's going to add to my overall recovery debt. And so I think the next phase is, strength and conditioning coaches being able to actually back off sometimes and have a good indication for, okay, is this player just kind of sandbagging it, or are they just really under recovered? They need, we just got to focus on active recovery today. And I think that's kind of the next step of things.
Yeah, it's getting better. How did you get into this? Like what kickstarted like the whole fitness thing for you? Because everybody has that that period of time in their life, when they were like, you know what, I love this. This is what I want to do. I want to focus my life on this.
I got picked on a lot and bullied when I was young, really badly. And so I picked up lifting weights to try to stop getting bullied and get attention from girls. And it didn't really fix either of those two things, but I fell in love with lifting weights. I picked it up when I was like 15, and then I kind of quit when I got my first girlfriend, shocker. And then at 17, I picked it back up, and I never stopped. And so as I was finishing high school, I played baseball through high school, and I kind of knew I wasn't really going to go. Like I was a good player, but I'm a 5'10" right-handed average hitting first baseman. Those aren't really in high demand. So I could have walked on to a team in college, but it's like, for what end? You know what I mean? And so I was going to go, originally my first passion was sharks. I love sharks. I love marine biology. I still love going out in the water and on the ocean. And I love fishing. And I was going to go to Eckerd College in St. Petersburg, Florida, because they had a great marine science program. But then I talked to a few actual marine scientists, and they're like, hey, like, go general first. And then if you want to specialize, do that in graduate school, because if you specialize too early and this ends up not being a thing, you can't really use that degree anywhere else. And also it doesn't really pay well. So I'm like, okay. So I decided I would do biochemistry as a freshman in college, but I was already kind of getting into bodybuilding as baseball was ending. I was like, oh, I found out there was like teen bodybuilding competitions. I'm like, oh, I could do this thing, right? To focus me and give me something to work towards. And my roommate freshman year actually was into bodybuilding too. So it was like the perfect setup for like getting really into the sport. And I signed up for my first bodybuilding show the summer after my freshman year. I won that, the teen division and the novice division. And that was like, fell in love, you know? And so 3 years into doing biochemistry, I was like, well, I don't know what I want to do with my life, but I know I want to do it in the fitness industry. But at the time, the ways to make money were basically like open a gym, be a PT, start a supplement company, try to be Mr. Olympia. And I'm like, those didn't feel like things that I didn't come from money. I didn't really have like capital to put down. I didn't like the idea of a bunch of debt. So I was like, well, you know what? I'll go to like grads. Like literally the reason I went and did a PhD was because I was like, well, I can delay the real world by 4 to 8 years. And hopefully by then I'll have that shit figured out, you know? So as I went into graduate school, I was writing for bodybuilding.com. I started writing for them and then some other websites and then some other magazines. And I was posting on their forums. Like I probably made 100,000 posts over 10 years on these different internet message boards. And just had people emailing me, asking me questions, wanting me to write them diets. So I took my first online client in 2005, started doing that. That within 3 years turned into a full-time business and I was off. And then all the other things that kind of sprouted out of that. And I was early adopter of social media. So it was kind of this weird synergy as social media was coming up. I was doing my PhD. I was doing, real research in protein metabolism and nutrition. I was also coaching people. So I was applying it. I was competing myself. So I was applying it to myself. And I really think that synergism of things really gave me a unique perspective on this stuff. And quite frankly, I think it made, athletes, people who do this stuff, they don't just want to talk to some egghead who has never tried to apply it to themselves or anybody else, right? Like when I was on Rogan's podcast 2018, the thing he said was like, you're actually like, you actually train hard. Like you walk the walk, like you do it, you apply this stuff, And so before me, not totally, there were some people who were like into bodybuilding who did PhDs before me, but I was kind of like the first visible person who did it. It was kind of thought, well, you're either going to go, do research and be an egghead, or you're going to be, lifting hard and not really caring about research and doing bro stuff. And so I saw that as like, maybe I could be the bridge. You know what I mean? Maybe I could show people that like, hey, hardcore and evidence-based are not mutually exclusive, And so that's kind of how I got into it. And I had a great PhD advisor who I'm actually going to go see this weekend because he's getting a Lifetime Achievement Award from the American Society for Nutrition. And honestly, this is what I try to teach now. His name's Don Layman. A couple things. The first thing was he taught me how to think, which I think is so difficult. It is easy to fall into black and white. It's easy to be cognitively dissonant. What's really hard is to continuously question what you believe to be true. And he challenged me so much on so many things. I just got okay with being wrong. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I got to the point where I'm like, okay, I care more about the right answer than I do about being right. Like I like being right. Don't get me wrong. I'll do like somersaults in my living room if I'm right, but I care more about getting the right answer, right? Because I'm a competitor. I want to do the best thing. Like that's what I tell people. I'm like, don't you think that if this thing you're talking about was really that great or really that bad, that I would change the way I do things? Like I would,
Yeah, I think ego gets in the way of a lot of strength coaches in general. Like I've seen it, they're ego driven.
Well, and also people make a way of training or a way of eating an identity.
Yeah.
That's also what happens, right? So if you've got, for example, carnivore Katie in your profile, if you come to the realization that maybe carnivore is not the best thing ever, it's pretty hard to walk that back.
Right.
That's why you don't see flexible dieting in my profile. You don't see macro counting. You don't see high volume train. You don't see any of that stuff because I don't want to tie my horse that strong to anything because I could be wrong. I don't think I'm wrong on that stuff, but I could be. And so he taught me that. And he also, I remember when I was giving my PhD or actually a great story here. I'll tell it real quick. My first experiment I ever did, I got the data back and I'm like, this can't be right. We were looking at the duration of muscle protein synthesis in response to a meal. And I just thought however long the amino acids stayed up in the blood would be how long protein synthesis went. And it did. Protein synthesis ran for like 3 hours, was done while amino acids were still elevated in the blood. And I reran the plasma amino acids probably like 6 times. And finally, Layman brings me in his office and he's like, where do we stand with this duration study? I'm like, yeah, I just got to run the plasma stuff one more time because it can't be right. And he's like, go on, explain this to me. Why do you think it's not right? And I'm like showing him the data. He's like, your standard errors look good. Your technique for measuring this on the HPLC is good. It sounds like, I'll never forget this line. It sounds like you're trying to change the data to fit your conclusion. And what you need to do is change your conclusion to fit the data. And I was like, oh shit. I'm like, that is textbook cognitive dissonance right there. I was so attached to what I believed to be true that I was just straight looking past the data, right?
Yeah.
And so then like that experiment actually kind of changed the way I ate a little bit. And like, I'm like that to me, when I was wrong in the stuff I measured or my hypothesis, that actually ended up being the coolest shit that came out of my PhD, right? So like, I just made me okay with being wrong. And then I was giving my exit seminar. One other thing he said that stuck with me, I said, okay, my mom's going to be at my exit seminar and professors are going to be at my exit seminar. Who do I write this for? And he goes, I should learn something and your mom should learn something. And I was like, oh man, because that's hard to write for, right? Because, the general population wants you to generalize, but if you generalize too much, you lose a lot of the nuance. So I just got really good at being able to like relay complex stuff in kind of a relatable way. And he was a big part of that. But I think it's, teaching, I try to teach people how to think. I try to make them think about stuff. And one of the things I tell people, it's hard to navigate the landscape of social media because it's a fire hose of information, right? Like you're just getting blasted with information all the time. And listen, compared to 20 years ago, all we had was the bro science magazines. So I think it is better now because you can actually find good evidence-based people who have some pretty good followings, but you're going to have to sift through a lot of crap, right?
Yep.
I tell people, listen to the way people talk, not so much what they say, but the way they talk. Big red flags are when somebody uses words best, worst, always, never, right? Like as an NFL football player, if I said, okay, you want to get past that offensive lineman, here's the best move for everybody. I was like, no, some guys bull rushed, right? Freeney had the spin move. Like it just depends on the individual, right? Like, and it depends on the context, who you're going against, what kind of offense, what kind of scheme do they have, right? Like it depends on everything, right? I always relate it also to like look at when the Patriots were at their best, right? They would run the ball 70 times in a game, and then the next game they'd throw it 60 times. They did not care.
They schemed up the best possible plan to win the game.
And some guys would go, you know what? We run the ball and play defense. It's like, well, that works until somebody figures out your stuff.
Yeah. And everybody's gonna get figured out. It's kind of like a plateau, when you hit like a plateau and you kind of peak out like with training, it's like, well, I got to change something then. That means I got to do something different. All right, guys, I want to talk to you about a product that I've been using for a long time, over a decade. When I was playing football, one of my main staples in my diet was bison. I got my bison from Great Range Premium Bison. They make some of the finest cuts of bison you can get. These guys have ribeyes, ground beef, all the steaks that you want. My favorite part about Great Range is that you don't have to worry about antibiotics or growth hormones in their meats. Great Range Premium Bison is a family-owned company providing bison meat from family-owned ranches around the country. So please go check out greatrangebison.com. And it's really interesting with the training stuff because now that I'm doing different things, I trained since I was 7 years old to be a football player. That's the only kind of football and wrestling and then just football for the last 15, 20 years. And it's like, okay, now that I'm like, I do all these backcountry hunts, now I have to like be ready for that, right? And obviously I don't want to do explosive always be doing explosive training to go pack, 60 pounds for 12 miles, and then wake up the next morning and do it again, and have to continue to do that. So it's like, what kind of training do I do now to change that? That means my eating has to change. That means everything has to change. So it's all about functionality. Like, what are you doing? Like, what are you training for? Like, what is your purpose for, like, do you just want to look good? Okay, that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But if you want to just look good, you have to eat a certain way. If you're just doing it because you want to be be an influencer on Instagram and show how hard you work out, you want to be David Goggins, you have to eat a certain way for that. It's everybody has a different niche, right? So like whatever you're actually training for, that's how you have to eat, and that's how you have to think. And that's it. And it changes, right? It doesn't have to be the same thing over and over. That's why I never, I do jujitsu. I like to lift heavy still. And I like to backpack hunt. So that's 3 different types of training. So I just try to implement that into my weekly schedule, right? So like I'll do jujitsu on Tuesdays and Thursdays. Mondays I'll do like a full body strength workout, right? And not do anything too heavy, higher rep, more functionality. And then on Wednesdays I'll go heavy. That's when I'll do like my heavy lifts. So I'll do like my heavy trap bar squats or trap bar deadlifts. I'll do like my heavy box squats, my heavy bench press, my heavy pulls, stuff like that on that day. Because I don't really think I need to do multiple heavy days, and then I'll do jujitsu again on Thursday, and then I'll do another strength day right after jujitsu on Thursday. And then on Friday, I do like a functional, so I go to the range and I take my bow with me, and we'll have like sandbags and stuff. And I'm doing like step ups and then run and sprint down and run back and then shoot my bow with my heart rate really high, because that's hunting. That's what happens when you're out there hunting. Your heart rate gets really high and you got to make these shots. So it's all that is different. So I've had a really hard time figuring out like, how do I eat for this? Cause it's like every day is kind of different for me. So I just try to find something that works. And I'm starting to lean out more, but it's been a slow process. Cause you have to think I have all these. That's the other mistake I think people make, is that they think, oh, I should lose this weight quick. Well, no, because think about how long it took you to get fat.
Exactly. And I like what you brought up in that when you're describing that, because when you asked me the first question, the first thing I did back about breakfast, the first thing I did back was ask you a question, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think, another red flag is when you end up being a hammer and everything's a nail, right?
Yeah.
Well, low carb is the best diet for inflammation and heart disease and cancer and for building muscle. And it's like, really? Do you think it's actually going to be the best for all those things? Like, and that I'm not picking on low carb. That goes for any kind of diet cult group, right?
Right.
So I tell people, like, it is all contextual dependent, and real experts, one of the things you'll see is they'll say things like, I was on a call yesterday with our students and somebody asked me a question. I go, hey, I actually don't know the answer to that. I'll look and see if I can find it, but I actually don't know. And if you're a real expert, I mean, you're going to say those magic words. One of the things that was beaten into me as a graduate student at Illinois was the importance of knowing what you know and knowing what you don't know. In fact, we had to do what was called a qualification exam, which was an oral examination for 3 hours in front of 4 professors, and they could ask you anything. And the way they started off, and they would take every question to a terminal point, meaning they would ask you down the rabbit hole until you didn't know the answer. And you had to know when to say, I don't know. So they started off, I'll still never forget. They started off with, let's talk vitamins. What's your favorite? I'm like, oh, vitamin D. Okay. Where's it synthesized? How's it metabolized? What are they like, like all the way down until I had to say, I don't know. Right. And when I got to the end of that exam, they said, you were the best student we've had in the last few years because you knew exactly what you knew and you knew what you didn't know. And what we don't want and what we've had is people who go out into the world and end up talking about stuff that's outside their scope, and they end up making us look bad.
Yeah, they're just making shit up.
Yeah, exactly. And there's so many people who do that, who just feel like they tried something with them and they felt better. Okay, well, you're one person, right? Like I always tell people, anecdote, I mean, it's meaningful for you. I don't want to discount somebody's personal experience, but There's a reason we do randomized control trials, because you're a human and you have this stupid monkey brain, and humans don't change behaviors in isolation, right? Like somebody goes, well, I stopped eating bread and I lost weight. Okay, but you also started exercising. You were eating less calories. Like you're telling me, like you perfectly controlled your calories. You cut out bread and you noticed that you lost weight, and it was because of no, you didn't. Like, and I'm not like, for them, hey, it worked, right? So more power. But we can't then generalize that, right? And by the same token, I'll tell people studies are useful, but scientific studies are big blunt instruments, because they're so rigid in what they can test if they're done well, that how broadly you can apply them you can only apply them in terms of, on average, this appears to be what does best, right? But there are outliers as well. And so we have to hold out that, hey, if I'm starting with a new client, I'm probably going to start them at the averages, right? In terms of what we think is best. But then we're going to pay attention to how they respond and then adjust accordingly.
So when you start with a client, what do you want to do? Right? Is that where you start with first? Like, what are you trying to do here? Like, what is your main goal? Because I think too many people get started in this and they don't really have a goal. They just are like, oh, I want to feel better or look better. It's like, well, no, that's too broad, I think.
Or they have goals that are counteracting to each other, or they aren't reasonable with the goals they're setting. And one of the things I talk to our coaches about in Physique Coaching Academy is, I'm like, you better make sure that your expectations and your client's expectations are aligned. Because if not, I learned the hard way. I had expectations for a client that were, say, here, but the client's expectations were here. We hit my expectations. I'm happy. They didn't hit theirs because we didn't have that conversation,
Mm-hmm.
right? So now I'm like, we better be crystal clear. You're telling me what you want. I'm telling you, okay, I think that's doable, or hey, that's like really not doable because XYZ, or here's the thing that you're working against. And I think a lot of people, I tell people, man, there's seasons of life. So like when you were playing NFL football, I'm not sure, but I'm guessing you probably didn't have time for a whole lot else, right?
Yeah.
Like it's being focused on that. You probably had some downtime in the off season. You had your bye week. My guess is a lot of times just resting up to feel better. But you weren't doing a whole lot. That wasn't the time to go on big hunts every week.
Well, no, we would go, my wife will tell you, we did like a European trip because she was like, if you want to have kids, you got to take me to Europe first. And I was like, all right. But like when we would travel in the off, like right when the season's over, she would have to find gyms for me to train at, because I don't like that feeling of thinking somebody else is going to be working while I'm like, feeling complacent and like having a good time.
When you have your career could be over like that.
Yeah. There's a new group of guys coming every year. There's somebody there every year. There's a draft. And think about how many universities there are across the country. And all of those kids are trying to come. They're all trying to make it to where you're at. So they're all coming for your job. There's thousands and thousands of kids coming for your job every year. And so, for 10 years, that was the mindset I had. I was like, I'm not going to let anybody take my job.
And it's ruthless, because you could be an all pro and they will cut you the next year.
Listen, Peyton Manning was cut and let go.
Exactly.
They let Tom Brady go.
Yeah. Yeah. Too much money.
Yeah.
Too much money.
Yeah. They'll let you go.
I tell people, like, I've had this conversation where, like, hey, you're going back to school, you're working 2 jobs, you've got kids, you're a single parent, like maybe now isn't the best time to be getting into competing in bodybuilding.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, hey, I'm not saying we can't do better, but I'm saying, like, we're trying to fit 4 pieces on a board that only has slots for 3.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? And like, hey, you're not going to be working 2 jobs forever. You're going to get through school. You're going to get a better job, that pays better, that you'll have more time. And then is the time, right? But it's okay with having seasons of life. Like when I was, in graduate school, I didn't have much of a social life because I was competing in bodybuilding, and I was also doing my online business. Didn't leave a lot of time for a social life, right? But that was okay. I had more of a social life in my 30s and 40s, and that's fine. Like, I get to live those seasons. But I think one of the marks of a good coach is really not just agreeing with everything the client says, but being able to give feedback to the client that actually puts them in a position to have the appropriate expectations for their goals, right? I mean, we deal this with a lot, like my nutrition coaching app, Carbon shirt I'm wearing, which is those aren't familiar, it's a algorithm-based nutrition coaching app that's only like less than $10 a month. Because obviously, my team can only coach so many people. So having like a nutrition coach in your pocket is a pretty nice kind of thing for people who can't afford that sort of thing. We get so many people who are like, well, I want to build muscle and lose fat and do this. And it's like, I'm not saying you can't do that. You can, but typically when you chase two rabbits, you usually catch neither. You focus on a goal for a specific period of time. And then once you've done that, then switch. I just see so many people chase their tails over long periods of time when it's like, man, if you just been focused for 6 months and then focused again on this other thing for 3 months, you would have gotten what you wanted overall.
People waste a lot of time kind of going in circles and not making a real decision, kind of being all over the place. It happens. I mean, we all make that mistake. I make that mistake sometimes. Just not locking in on one thing and having a long-term goal, but you have to set those short-term goals on the road to that long-term goal.
Absolutely.
And that's like when you say a guy wants to get, or a guy or gal wants to, I want to lose fat, gain muscle, get lean, do all this thing. Well, we got to focus on one first, right? So let's focus on losing fat first, right? And then once we'll lose some fat, now let's focus on building some muscle. All right. Now let's focus on leaning that out. Like that's like a year plan, right? That's a 365-day plan. And here's the way we get to it. And a lot of people aren't able to make that commitment. They just aren't. And then they're pissed that they can't get it. And it's like, well, you didn't really make the sacrifice and the commitment to do it.
Well, a lot of it boils down to now there's, back in the day, there was pretty unrealistic expectations based on the magazines, but now there's really unrealistic expectations based on social media, right? Because they're only showing you, like, this is one of the things I'm so passionate about. Like, I had a really bad week of training the last couple of weeks and I put it online. I'm like, yeah, this week sucked. And I've been real fatigued. I had to take 100 pounds off my deadlift just to hit a single, all this kind of stuff. But I'm like, I'm telling you guys this not to complain. This is normal. This happens. But most other people won't show you this stuff because they don't want you to know that there's chinks in the armor,
They want to show the perception that everything is rainbows and everything's good to go at all times. And I'm always good and I'm always positive. Everybody has a shitty day of training. Like everybody has a shitty day mentally. And they're just like, oh man, I'm just having a hard time getting into it. Hey everybody, this episode is brought to you by Black Buffalo. Black Buffalo's nicotine pouches do not contain tobacco leaf or stem. What they do contain is a ton of flavor, and they're packed with pharmaceutical grade nicotine. The magic of Black Buffalo is they discovered a way to make cured edible green leaves behave like the texture of tobacco. And they add food grade ingredients for industry classic flavors. You're in good company if you roam with the Black Buffalo herd. The business was built by dippers with decades of smokeless tobacco use. They manufacture their tobacco alternatives with respect for those products that came before them. Bold flavors, full pouches, metal lids, and a brand that stands for something, American. Their products are also proudly endorsed by brand ambassadors such as MMA Hall of Famer, Cowboy Cerrone, NASCAR champion, Brian Blaney, rising country star, Larry Fleet, and Rob O'Neill, former U.S. Navy SEAL Team 6. So if you're 21 and older and you consume nicotine or tobacco and you want to join the Black Buffalo herd, head over to blackbuffalo.com to learn more. You can order nicotine pouches online and they ship directly to most states. Or you can check out their store locator to purchase pouches at thousands of retail locations around the country. Black Buffalo, an American brand, pouches worth respect. That's why I wanted to talk to you. Like the next thing I wanted to roll into was the powerlifting. Because I've always loved like strongman powerlifting. Like I've always, I was actually the strongest player in college football my senior year. My numbers were pretty crazy. I know you probably like hearing numbers, but I'm not trying to like brag or anything. But I was squatting, like I said, 675 for like 4 or 5 reps. I was doing that was beltless, no belt.
Wow.
And then I was doing I was bench pressing 475 for 5 reps. I did 405 for 12 reps one time and they stopped me and they were like, that's enough. and I only weighed 285 pounds. So I was like so strong. And then my power clean was like 435. from the ground. And then we didn't really deadlift. So I just didn't have a deadlift number. But as far as like all across the board, I was the strongest kid in college football. And it was like, holy shit. Like I wasn't even like trying to be that. I was just like trying to get as strong as I possibly could because I wanted to come into the NFL and not be like, oh, I got to get stronger. I wanted to be like, all right, I'm already strong as shit. Like I'm going to be good. And, you know, I've been able to maintain that strength. So what I wanted to talk to next was like, how did you, when you're powerlifting, right? Like, let's talk about mindset, because that is like, I love that because you're training for this one moment, right?
Right.
When you compete, like you're going into this one moment, this one big pull, and it's gotta be perfect. You know, everything has to be perfect. Your mindset if you have any doubt in your mind that you're not going to be able to pick that up, you're fucked. So what is your mindset going into like how do you mentally prepare yourself to do that lift? And I'm talking about in the moments, like you're about to walk out on stage. What is your mindset?
Everybody's got different ways to kind of psych themselves up and get in the moment. The reality is, if you haven't done the work, you haven't done the repetitive work over time to build the confidence of what you can do. I mean, I know how strong I am going in. I know that like there's not going to be randomly 50 pounds added to my lift. You know, I know what my range is of what I can do. And I'm confident about that because of how many times I've done it in training, how many times I've done it when I felt like crap, right? Like it's the same way I'm sure in football when you've done something over and over and over. Again, people want to focus on hacks and stuff, and it's like, no, dude, I'm confident from experience because I know what I can do. Now it's just about going out and executing, right? And you know, I've been competing in powerlifting since 2009. And I got a pretty good reputation as somebody who executes on game day. Like you don't usually get A minus Layne Norton, you usually get A plus. And in fact, my game day coach told me there's nobody I trust more with a third deadlift in their hands than you in the entire world of anybody I've ever coached. And this guy's coached many world champions. And when I'm actually at the meet, at that point, I'm not even really thinking about the lift. I'm just trying to max out my arousal, my excitement, so that I can generate as much, you know, neuromuscular force. Because part of it is not just the muscle you have, it's the neural drive, right? And that is amplified through arousal, right? I mean, sure, you guys did the same thing before a game. You're listening to music, you're getting in the mindset, right? Like you can't just go out there and flip the switch on this. I have a ritual that starts hours out from the meet, right? And so when I'm back there, you know, usually what'll happen is once I start warming up, you know, backstage, I've got my headphones in. I'm not listening to anything that like, I'm listening to mostly motivational speeches and stuff, right? And then once we get near to where, like when I hit my last warm up, I would say I'm probably about 80% fired up, right? And then when we start to go out for attempts, you know, I'm pulling up pictures of my kids. I'm, you know, pulling up motivational quotes. I am just trying to do anything I can to make myself as aroused as possible, excited as possible, right? And one of the things I tell people is, you know, when I played baseball, I used to get the butterflies, you know, and I would try to like stop that. And now I still get that. The only difference is now I perceive it as, hell yes, this is a good thing. This is my body getting me ready. In fact, I'll tell you a game-changing moment for me. I was watching the Ultimate Fighter 5, Team Hughes versus Team Sarah 15 years ago. And Matt Serra had one of his fighters who was like throwing up before a fight. And he's over a bucket and he's like, I can't do this anymore, man. I hate the way this feels. And Matt Serra looks right at him and goes, man, that's the feeling of being alive. What are you talking about?
Yeah.
He's like, you care about something so much that's causing, he's like, most people never get that. And so from that moment on, I'm like, whenever I get those butterflies, that nerves, that gross feeling that people try to suppress, I'm like, this is the feeling of being alive.
Yeah, you embrace it.
I get to enjoy this, right? So yeah, when we're about like 2 lifters out, I've got my song on that's gonna hype me up. I'm like, you know, moving. I'm like just thinking about all the work I've put in, everything I've done. And I'm saying to myself, so those once you're up and they load the bar, you have 1 minute after they yell bar is loaded, you have 1 minute to get the squat command, the start command, or the down command and deadlift. And I always think of it as like, this is like a sprinter at the starting line. As soon as they say that, I'm getting shot out of here like a cannon. You know what I mean? Like I'm attacking this thing. Like they're having to hold me back right now. And as soon as that hits, I am gone. You know what I mean? And yeah, when it comes to like just mindset, like I'll give you an example. Going into last deadlift, we'd already secured the win. And my coach said we were going for best overall lifter. So it's basically scaled on body weight. And he's like, you've definitely got 323. I'm speaking in kilograms. You got 323, 325.5 might be a push. But 325.5 sets an all-time deadlift record for me at that body weight. And after going through 9 years of injuries and stuff, at first I said, okay, well, let's secure best lifter. Let's do 323. And then 10 seconds later, I turn around and I go, to hell with that, Ben. Load 325.5. I'm not missing today. I'm like, if it's 2.5 kilograms, there's no way I'm missing a deadlift on 2.5 kilograms on 5 pounds. Like, screw that. And yeah, I just remember I walked out and I say like weird shit to myself sometimes, but I said, when they load it, you want me, meaning when they load the bar and you need a lift, you want me on the bar, right? So I went out, pulled it, actually smoked it. And I came backstage and Ben was like, you just don't make any sense. You know, you're 42 years old. You're stronger than you've ever been. And you've gone through all these injuries. And he's like, I honestly, I got to stop sandbagging you. You just keep surprising me after all these years. And I think it's just, you know, having gone through all those injuries, taking, you know, 9 years to get back to where I was when I started going down that path, to be able to do that, like that just builds so much confidence. Like now I'm like, you can't even mess with me, you know, like I just know that I can do this stuff. And that's long story, but that's kind of my mindset. I look at it as like, I'm going to come out, I'm going to hit all my lifts. I'm going to go 9 for 9. And I'm going to make other people have to be perfect to beat me. Like you are going to have no mistakes if you want to beat me. Like you might, every time I won nationals, I wasn't the strongest guy there, but I just executed where other people started to fold. And I'm like, you know what? I like the phrase from Prefontaine. You might beat me, but you're going to have to bleed to do it.
Yeah. That, you know, it's something we always used to say is they might get me, but I'm going to get them more than they get me. Like that was,
yeah.
like, you know, everybody out here on this field is getting paid to do this. And we're the best in the world. So they're going to get theirs, but I just got to make sure I get mine more than they get theirs. And that's
exactly.
And it's with something that you said that I like really strongly believe in is that you have to practice like you play. So if you never lift heavy as you can in training, and then you go and you think, oh, I'm just going to be, this is the strongest I'm going to be. That's silly to think that way. And there was guys, the anomalies that they didn't have to practice hard, but then when the lights came on, they were just like, it was like they were shot out of a cannon and they just dominated. But for me, I had to have a good week of practice to make sure that like when it come game time, like I would see the backfield set and know exactly what play is coming. So I've already won. If I know what play is coming, I've already won. So there's no guesswork involved. It's just, I just have to get through this guy and then I know I'm there. So it made my job easier. And it was all about preparation. I prepared like I was in a game. I played like I was in a game. I ran to the ball every single play like it was in a game. A great coach told me once, you know, you get paid to practice. The game is for fun.
Yep.
And when I had that mindset, I always had way more fun playing in a game. And it made practice more fun too, because I was thinking, you know what, I am getting paid to practice. Like this is my job, is to come practice. And then the game is for fun. We got a crowd and fans, and it was, you know, you make a big play and just stand over and howl over somebody. Like it's the best feeling, you know. And it's like you fail over and over and over. And like pass rushing is failure. You're constantly failing. Like that's why you see it. Oh, a guy had a 10% win rate. It's like, oh, that's really good.
That's,
you know,
beast. Yeah.
You know, he's beasting out there. Cause it's like, they're using 2 guys to block you. You're chipping you with tight ends and running backs. And, you know, for me, I had to help Von Miller a lot. So like a lot of stuff I was doing was to like set him up to make plays and put him in position and eat up blocks for that and eat up blocks for linebackers to fill gaps. So when you finally get to go make your play, you get maybe 1 or 2 opportunities in a game. You got to take advantage. So I understand what that's like, you know, building up to this one moment and then popping.
Well, that's what, you know, Ben, my coach, would say to me is like, you know, the reason I have confidence in you is because you always do the work. The work is what gives you confidence. You can read about confidence all you want. Confidence comes through experience because you've done this. You've done all that work. Like I know, like when I set that world squat record, I'd done it in my mind 10,000 times, but I also, like, this is back in 2015, but the kind of training I did, I mean, Ben even said this would have broken most people. And he's like, and you did it. You went through, I was like squatting 4 times a week, you know, some crazy, like
Yeah.
25 hard sets a week with deadlifts twice. But by the time I got there, you know, we hit the last warm up. This is in Finland. We hit the last warm up. We're walking to the holding area, and he looks at me and goes, "There was no question. This is yours today." And I remember, like, the world record at the time was 300 kilograms. All we had to do was chip it to 300.5, and I go for my third squat. And I look up on the board and I see 303, and I'm like, "Hey man, are you sure? Because if I miss this, we don't even get a bronze in this event. Like, that's how tight it is. We don't need it for the world record." And he goes, "I know, but you're not going to miss." And I'm like, "Okay." And we had that kind of relationship where I knew he was never going to put anything on the bar that I couldn't do.
Yeah.
You know? And so it was like, at that point, I know I can do it. I just have to go out and execute. And I've done it 10,000 times. And so I'm confident I'm going to go out and execute.
And you did it. You just got to move the weight.
But if I had to give people one piece of advice in general, paralysis by analysis and perfectionism have killed more goals than failure ever could. Like you said, it's failure over and over and over. And I'm sure there was times in your career, there's certainly been times in my career of lifting where I'm like, I'm never going to get past this. You know, like, it just feels like you're going up against a brick wall. And that's what separates people from really who do some shit from people who just kind of, you know, go away. And I think I tell people, go with the imperfect plan right now and do it, and just trust that you'll figure out the kinks on the back end.
Yeah. The fear of failure is, you know, that holds people back big time. A lot of people are just, you know what? It's just like, you think back to the first time you had to talk to a girl, you know, you wanted to, it's like, you were like so scared. Every boy felt that, you know, that fear of failing or being rejected. It was like so terrifying that some people just never even make that leap.
Well, I tell people, hey, let me take the fear out of it for you. You're going to fail.
You're going to fail. Yeah. You're going to get rejected, and that's okay. That's okay. It's okay to lose and to fail, and that's where the growth happens. You know, it's like, okay, maybe I just got to do something different next time. Or, you know, maybe I just got to try again, or, you know, that's the best part about it. Let's talk about your books. Like, what made you want to write books? Cause you wrote 2 best-selling, but they're bestsellers, right?
Yeah. So Fat Loss Forever, Complete Contest Prep Guide. I just saw a need for, you know, some very practical kind of manual for, especially for competitors, but then also for the average person. And, you know, it goes deep into the science of everything, but it's also like a very practical step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4. You know, if you walk the steps, it works. And so I just felt like there wasn't a lot of synergism out there. It was either like overgeneralized steps without telling you why, or it was like too complicated to where people couldn't follow it, right? So I just wanted to kind of synergize those two.
That's awesome. And then your coaching book. What kind of prep is that? Prep for bodybuilding? Is that prep for powerlifting? Is that prep for just?
So that's prep for bodybuilding.
Okay.
And I've thought about, you know, possibly doing one for powerlifting in the future, but too many irons in the fire right now.
Yeah. I mean, you could definitely, and that's a hard train. A lot of guys that are like strong men don't look like bodybuilders. And, you know, when you see most powerlifters, they aren't built like, they don't have like definition really, you know, like from what I see, you know, from growing up, what I see, and it was always like, oh, you don't want to look like that. You want to be all bulky, and, you know, that's how you get strong. But you are like you are the perfect example of how that's false. That's wrong. You could be both.
Yeah. And actually, if you look at guys who aren't the super heavyweights now, most guys who are top of the division are pretty muscular and not a ton of body fat, because fat doesn't move weight, muscle does.
Yep. That's right. It's like horsepower, right? You know, it's like, I always think of it as like an 18-wheeler. It was a coach told me this one time. He's like, if you have an 18-wheeler and you take that trailer off of it, they're powerful. You know, those semis are powerful, but you load it down with all this extra weight that's not adding to the fire and adding to the power output, and it's just putting load on it, it's going to slow it down. And I was like, that's the easiest thing for me to understand. I'm like, you know, mass moves mass was something people would say, but it's like, that's not true. You know, you need that horsepower is what moves it, you know, and that's just unbelievable advice that I got from really good coaches. All right. So let's talk about your website. What is like, if I'm just like the average guy, you know, and I'm like, oh, I want to look this guy up, you know, what am I going to find on your website?
So it's biolayne.com, and it's kind of a hub for everything I do. You can find everything there. You can find like a link to Carbon, Physique Coaching Academy. But on the website specifically, we've got Reps, which is my monthly research review where we break down research in a practical and easy sort of way. And then we've also got my workout builder. So if you can't afford like a one-on-one coach for training, it's an easy way. We take the guesswork out of the reps, sets, intensity, like all evidence-based programs on there. So you can subscribe to either of those or the two together. And it's a really great value.
Yeah, this is awesome. I really love this. And then so you started a supplement company. And we've always been told as athletes, they always told us like, oh, you don't need any of those supplements because there's no regulation on them and they can put whatever they want in them. So how do you ensure that you're putting out like a great product? And let's tell us what the name of your company is and what we can expect to find there.
So it's Outwork Nutrition, and we third-party test, and our manufacturing facility is third-party tested as well. So the manufacturer we use. And, we list everything right there on the label, right? Like there's no proprietary blends, nothing like that. Everything that's in there is you see the dosages, and you can go to our website, outworknutrition.com. And for every ingredient, we have studies to justify the use of that ingredient and the dosage. So we try to just be super transparent because there's not a lot of transparency out there in the industry.
Well, this is great, man. I appreciate the time, brother. I'll let you go because I know we're hitting that mark. So thank you for the time, man.
Yeah, Derek. Hey, thanks for having me on, man. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, of course.
Keep in touch.
Yep, will do. All right, thanks for listening. Be sure to leave a rating and review. Follow me on Instagram, DerekWolfe_95. Follow me on X, Derek_Wolfe95. And make sure you follow the Wolfe Untamed YouTube channel and like and subscribe, please.